I enjoy the process. I love everything, but like our job is to have really big exits for our LPs and return capital in a way that makes it such a no-brainer for them to reinvest in our next fund.
So if it's return capital investors, then you need to be really good at finding founders and companies. So what would you say would be your top 3 most important things when vetting a founder that you're looking for?
I'm going to give you 6.
No, Ed, you only get 3.
Yeah, I only get 3. There's that would make my job really hard if I only got 3.
Go ahead, I'll give you 6.
Okay, give me 6. I look for the founder's background, like why them. I look for unit economics that makes sense. I look for a market that is sizable, that we can grow something that has that potential to hit unicorn status.
Right.
I look at the valuation as we're coming in there, say like what are the downside risks and protection that we have, and we're looking at the competition. Like what is going to stand in our way if this thing makes sense to have this happen. You combine all of that together on top of our studio doing vetting around the technical abilities of the team and, what is it, how are they building this, platform or software, whatever it is that they're doing. Can we check the box that like this is actually possible and they actually understand how to do this? There you go. And at the end of the day, it's off to the races. All right.
Welcome to Tech Scenes.
Thank you. Stoked to be here.
All right, so we're gonna go for a little ride.
Let's do it. One end of the street is Noya House, where we have our office.
Okay.
And then on the other end of the street is the skate park that I'm working on with the city to refresh and revitalize a new plaza-like skate park for skateboarders of all levels.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Even old washed up skateboarders from the 90s?
Even you, even me. You got your little kids there. You got the new like hot up and comers. And do it in a way that feels like it's almost like you're like walking through Europe or something like that. Like a plaza where there's marble and it's just gorgeous and
oh wow.
Something you don't recognize as a skate park, but is skateable.
Now, is this part of the Tony Hawk Foundation?
This is part of the Tony Hawk Foundation, but this is also just my own personal project, just being in the neighborhood. We have one of the most advanced, great skate parks on the beach. People come from all over the world to go there and be seen and, have that experience. But to have something that is a little bit more approachable for kids, beginners of all ages, shapes, and sizes is a big thing. And with skateboarding, I think we have this push to make it as inclusive as possible, and that means also creating spaces that people feel safe in. People feel like they're welcome, and that's what we're doing with this thing over here.
My growing up skateboarding was this like really inclusive environment, non-competitive. Well, I didn't compete, but it was non-competitive. That we're always like, someone learned a trick, everybody else was teaching them how to do it, or how to learn a trick. Like, how'd you do that? Like, you could ollie over a garbage can. Like, everyone's like, okay, how do you do that? You know, like, it was always this like inclusive, like work together, learn together environment that I always loved. I get that now from like jiu-jitsu. It's that kind of same thing. You're always teaching each other and learning from each other and passing it on. But skateboarding is, I think, very unique in that, unlike other sports.
Jiu-jitsu and skateboarding are similar in that they are physical chess. So you're like constantly figuring out things. You're trying to like morph how to do things, in jiu-jitsu you have an opponent. But I'd say that the interesting thing, like a lot of times people compare skateboarding to surfing, and the real big difference there is a finite amount of waves. There's a competitiveness to when you're out there in the water where it's like once that wave goes by, it's never coming again.
Right.
Skateboarding, the ramp's always there.
Yeah.
The rail's always there. It's not going anywhere. So there's a little bit more of a kind of like
Take turns.
Yeah, take turns, community around it, help each other out. Like,
Right.
there's nobody's in a rush over here.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, a lot of people make the surfing and jiu-jitsu kind of connection too. It's hard to learn to surf in later years. I found out learning to surf because of that competitiveness, and I don't want to get in anybody's way.
Right.
You know,
Right,
like
right.
I don't want to ruin someone that spent more time out there than me. I don't want to
Right.
ruin their experience or what they're doing.
I would say, something I think about when I'm skateboarding these days, because it's always hard. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, even though I've been doing it for 30 years, it's always hard. I remember learning how to surf, which I learned about 10 years ago when we moved back to LA. And I think it's just good as an adult to do things you suck at.
Right.
And you have to get good at them, and they're hard and they're challenging. And it's like building up that like resilience is just something that I feel like you constantly need to work at, because it's like it's a muscle. It's a muscle like anything else.
Yeah, and it's letting that ego go and
letting that ego go. Let it. You're gonna get yelled at by somebody because you did something that you shouldn't have done. Like, you have to like get over it and then get back out in the water. Like,
and it's obvious when you screw up.
It's obvious when you screw up. And then also too, like, just it's humbling. Like, when I was learning, I went out there with your like Costco wave storm in conditions I shouldn't have been out there in, and it felt like I was gonna drown. Like, regardless of whether like it was actual or not, it felt like it was gonna happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having to be like, oh shit, like that's real, and like we're gonna have to like learn not to do that. And like, what do I do that prevents myself from having to be put in that situation? How do I avoid that?
It's funny, my friends that take me surfing are guys I train jiu-jitsu with, and they say since I'm more advanced, they know that I can understand the fact that I can be calm in the wake of underneath the water getting tossed around, right? You have to just be calm. You're going to come up, cover your head, you'll come up. And they told me that they usually don't take new people out, but they're like, you're not going to freak out.
Yeah.
Chill. Perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today.
Hey, all right, let's do it.
Right? I find that founders, or oftentimes there's so many stakeholders, it's hard for them to be transparent and fail in front of people. Yeah. Two, newer founders or the different types of personality founders sometimes flail, and they can't handle that stress and that pressure, and they don't understand that it's everybody's shared responsibility, not just theirs, right? And to be calm in that wake of the storm.
I think a lot about when we started Impulsum Ventures, and whenever you're building anything, there's those moments where you're like, oh shit, like, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And you kind of just keep working through the problems, and they end up resolving themselves. And a lot of the times it ends up being better than it was before. Yeah. But that kind of ability to have mental clarity when you're faced with like really intense situations is something like you truly think about when you're looking at investing in a company. When people talk about, the difference between first-time founders and, people who have done this before, the ones who have done this before kind of almost have built up that like
resilience.
Yeah, that resilience in themselves, that system to deal with really stressful situations. At the end of the day, especially when you're doing seed, pre-seed, there's not a lot to go off of. There's a good financial model. There's a good market size, there's a good opportunity, there's low competition. All of those things can check the box. A lot of the times at the end, it does come down to that founder, their ability to navigate, because things are going to go wrong and things are going to pop up that you could never have expected.
Well, just like always, you and I, we just go right into it. Like always, you and I, we just get right into it. So let's back up. Tell me about Impulsum Ventures, and it's also involves Impulsum Ventures collab.
Yes, Impulsum Ventures, we're a kind of different type of venture firm because we not only have our venture capital firm where we write checks into seed and pre-seed companies, but we also run a development studio that has 25 designers, engineers, product specialists. We have built a lot of platform technology that we can share with the companies that we invest in.
Interesting.
And so anytime we write a check to a company, we say, hey, like, we have a studio over here. There is zero obligation to use it. There's zero obligation to collaborate in a way. Just know that it's here if you need it. And what we found with most startups is that even with an incredible team, with everything that they could need, as you're growing, stuff comes up. And so our ability to be able to fill in those gaps for people has been extremely helpful. I think most companies, when we invest and we say, do you need anything? The answer is no. And then probably in a window of, let's call it like 6 to 12 months, they will touch the studio in one manner. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I looked up Impulsum because I was like, what does that word mean? I don't know what that word means. It actually means to be driven.
Yes.
And actually, I'm driving you right now.
There you go. It works out perfectly.
Yeah. And if I push down on this, it will just drive for us.
There we go.
Are you okay with AI?
I'm okay with AI.
Tell me, how much do you trust AI?
So the funniest, it's really funny. The first time I ever experienced a self-driving car was when I was coming back from one of our, late night VC events, and I'm in my Uber, I'm in the back, and we're going down the 10, and I look up and the guy is just like hands off the wheel, like hanging out there. And there's that moment where you're like, is this, do I say something? Like, or is this okay? And then you sit in your head and you're like, well, the stats say this is okay.
Right.
So I guess this is probably better. Also, I don't want to startle this guy, like in the middle of us going 75 miles down the freeway.
Yeah.
And I let it go. Yeah, I'm a believer in AI. I'm not afraid of AI. We build a lot with the studio in kind of these new AI platforms. And that's another thing that is been really incredible about having a studio alongside the fund. When we're vetting companies, we're not just looking at this from a traditional VC angle, but also as people who understand how this technology works.
Right.
So when you think about, most early stage funds, it's like, what ability do you have to kind of add more data points that can help de-risk an investment? Having a team at the studio that can run their CTO through the ringer, run their product and design team through it. Like when people say, this is what we're going to be doing with ChatGPT,
right? We
actually kind of know what you can do with it now and what you can't do because we're building on it as we speak.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I really like the fact that you guys have like this platform and this experience to kind of coincide with these investments. I think it's really unique. Yeah. I think it's something that others have tried and maybe not made it work.
Yeah.
Right? They thought it was a good idea, but you guys actually made it work. Now, let's dig in a little bit deeper. Why? I mean, like you said, you've been investing for 13 years. Mm-hmm. You played a variety of roles with investing. Like, why do you do it? Like, what drives you to do this?
I just really love the work. I know that sounds like silly, and that's like...
What about the work that do you love the most?
So, I love connecting with people, and I love meeting these entrepreneurs who are so thoughtful and knowledgeable about their space and are taking that jump to go and build something that has probably never been built before.
Right.
It's a really exciting thing to be a part of. And, as you're doing this, like, things come up. Like, it's not a straight line up into the red all the time. I always say it's going to look more like, a zoomed out view of the S&P 500. It's going to be that little like spiky thing. And as long as you're going up into the right, eventually, like, that's what you should do. But I think being that support for the founders in that process is just extremely rewarding from a day-to-day basis. And you go through this journey with them, and you see these people who maybe have never run a company before over a short period of time become these like almost Navy SEAL like CEOs, where it's like they're tested by the fires. Like, they go stronger with that resilience. Like, they navigate things, they negotiate these big partnerships with these companies that they might have worked for before.
Yeah.
And to watch somebody kind of become the best version of themselves, it's a really special thing.
It totally resonates with me. I think that's really in alignment with what I feel I'm passionate about too, is like, I want to make it easier for them and their team.
Mm-hmm.
Over the 25 years, like, I've gone in the trenches and found things that don't work. And I just want to help them connect an operating system so they can go faster, have more fun, make it easy. It's still going to be difficult.
Yeah.
But there's so many low-hanging fruit things that they can do and learn and implement that can just make the ride so much more fun.
not every day is rosy, and on the days that are hard, I sometimes sit there and I think, like, would I want to change places with anybody else? And the answer is no. Like, it really genuinely, like, when you think about it, I remember my dad one time saying to me, he's like, there must be like a word for work that, like, when it doesn't feel like work, when it just feels almost like a natural manifestation of yourself and you're enjoying it. And the Japanese have this concept of ikigai or ikigaya. I've never actually really known, like, what the right pronunciation is. But it is this idea of almost being able to do something that puts you in this flow state, but is of value, like, to society in general. And I mean, we're the beginning. We're the beginning of whatever the next company is, the GoPro camera, the Ubers, the Teslas.
Right.
We're that first check that believes in the idea and believes in these founders and starts that journey off with them.
How do you define success as an investor personally?
You return capital to your LPs. Literally, it's like, that is the number one most important thing. I enjoy the process. I love everything, but, like, our job is to have really big exits for our LPs and return capital in a way that makes it such a no-brainer for them to reinvest in our next fund.
So if it's return capital investors, then you need to be really good at finding founders and companies. So what would you say would be your top 3 most important things when vetting a founder that you're looking for?
I'm going to give you 6.
No, Ed, you only get 3.
Yeah, I get 3. There's that would make my job really hard if I only had 3.
Go ahead, I'll give you 6.
Okay, give me 6. I look for the founder's background, like, why them? I look for unit economics that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I look for a market that is sizable, that we can grow something that has that potential to hit unicorn status.
Right.
I look at the valuation as we're coming in there, say, like, what are the downside risks and protection that we have? And we're looking at the competition. Like, what is going to stand in our way if this thing makes sense to have this happen? You combine all of that together on top of our studio doing vetting around the technical abilities of the team and, what is it, how are they building this, platform or software, whatever it is that they're doing. Can we check the box that, like, this is actually possible and they actually understand how to do this? There you go. And at the end of the day, it's off to the races.
I think unit economics is actually often overlooked.
Yes.
It really is overlooked.
Yeah.
I know it's important, but, like, I think sometimes people think because it's early stage, it's not as important. I think it's super important. What are your thoughts on unit economics?
We almost kind of look at things as, like, how quickly can you get to profitability? I'm not saying you have to, I'm not saying that's the right path, but can you?
Right.
Because then essentially what you are creating is you are investing in a business. You're investing in a business that should work. There are a lot of investors who have been very successful who invest in those companies where it's like, hey, once we hit 100 million users, we'll start generating revenue. That's not for us. Like, we really look at this as saying, like, how do you make money off of each user from day one? We understand that there is going to be some back-end costs to scaling this thing. But how many users do we need, whether it's customers or individuals, that will make this thing to a point where it's break even and moves into profitability? And what's the capital that's going to take to get there? Making sure, especially in this market, that you have the right reserves and the right plan in place with enough buffer room around the edges so you can raise that next round if you need to, is just so vital.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Unit economics is kind of the starting of that financial plan.
Mm-hmm.
Thing that I see common in early stage seed, even in Series A, I even see it at the growth stage B and C, is that financial plan doesn't get baked internally in the organization.
Yeah.
So financial plan is like something that they do. It's an activity. It's given to prospective investors. It's given to the board. And then the team goes and runs. And oftentimes I'm inside hundreds of companies have seen this. This is not like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It's super common that the team doesn't know what those are.
Sure.
And they haven't built their 3-year vision or even their 1-year plan or dial in their OKRs to actually achieve some of these things. And I think it just gets lost. Early stage founder that just doesn't know, they haven't done that before.
Right.
Sometimes it's because the founder feels uncomfortable setting up goals, and because they're not sure what they can achieve, what they can achieve. And so then their team gets into this kind of spinning, do we have to hit goals? What are our goals? Have we defined goals? Are they the right goals? And they just don't have the setting point of that alignment, and that financial plan can be that setting point. It may be wrong, but it's best to set something, because then you have something to iterate on.
Yeah, and you have something to move towards.
Right.
Like I remember there's some founders that we invested in never hit their revenue goals each year, but their revenue goal was absurd. And we kind of all knew going into this, like when they would say like, and we're going to do this year, we'd go like, okay, great. And you'd walk away and be like, God, if they could do that, that would be insane. But even when they fell short, it was still like substantially higher than I think most people would have expected them to do. And I really do kind of almost feel like if you have those targets in mind and you try to think about how you push in these things, even if you end up falling short, like as long as you're on target and you have a trajectory where you have a business that will work and move into like almost like this steady state growth pattern, everything's going to be just fine.
I 100% agree with that, except one thing. The team has to have context. So what I've seen oftentimes is like they set super high goals, and the team feels like it's do or die. We have to hit these goals. The CEO's like, it'd be great to do that. And investors are like, you're saying like, oh, if they hit that, it's amazing. If they're a little bit low, we're all good. But I think the team needs to have context, because I've seen teams succeed and feel like they fail. Or I've seen, CEO, founders, and leadership teams set goals where they're like, we have to hit these goals, but they don't tell their team that. So then they fail, and then they're cutting, and people don't know why. Like, so I think if you set goals, you have to let your team know and have context. Like, this is a super high goal. We're trying to, land on the moon, or these are mid-range. Hopefully we can get over this, or this is like bottom we must hit. And I think a lot of teams get confused and they don't have that simple conversation. What types of goals are these? What's the context for these goals?
Well, you also have to know your team, right? Like, so there's like, let's take like a traditional enterprise salesperson, for example. Like sometimes what drives them is that goalpost moving further and further away each time. And it's like, that's what pushes them to do this. Versus you might have, some other function on your team where it's like, that's not what motivates them. That's not what makes them feel good. So I think that the thing that you and I are both seeing in this is that like there needs to be clear communication.
And alignment. Like I always tell people, like you can't focus. You can communicate all you want, but you first need to have focus. And to have focus, you have to have alignment. So we have to agree what we're focused on. Otherwise, people are going in 5 different directions, I find. And the other thing is, like, when you align, like, you need to have conversations. I think that's the hardest thing that a lot of people fear is not being aligned, so they don't have the conversations. And that creates a lot of gray area and a lot of gray space. So I always say, it's not staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning a PowerPoint for the investor or a new investor. It's having these difficult conversations with your team. And at the end of the day, there is a hierarchy. And either you align or disagree, but you still have to commit, or you can choose not to do it and not be part of it. But like, I think it's really important to have those conversations. Like, hey, ARR at the end of the year is going to be 10 million, and the head of sales like, I think it's going to be 8. And my role typically is like, okay, CEO, tell me why you think 10. Okay, head of sales, why do you think 8? And eventually, after they talk about it, they'll agree. And sometimes it's 12 then, they're like, and sometimes it's 7. But like, I think it's having those conversations. And I think a lot of times people are afraid to have those conversations. And sometimes people, even founders, are afraid to have that conversation with themselves. You know what I mean? And so not putting a line in the sand, sometimes they feel a little bit more comfortable with. But at the end of the day, it's going to cause problems. And to be clear about that, and like you said, communicate this and have the conversations. Better to do that up front than wonder what happens later.
Also, it could be that you have your CEO saying, I need it to be 10, and the VP of sales saying it's going to be 8, and then the CEO's job is like, what do you need from me for it to be 10?
And that's exactly how I see OKRs. The objective is, what do we want to accomplish? And the key result isn't just measuring the objective. I love the book, Measure What Matters, and so glad I did that. But one piece that they're missing really comes from Drucker, who made management by objectives that everybody used before OKRs. How are we actually going to achieve this? right? So here's our objective. All right, now let's have the important conversation. How do we actually achieve this? And it's really important with teams that we're talking about because they're so cross-functional.
Right.
Like to hit that sales number, guess what? Product needs to be involved. And of course, sales needs to be involved. Marketing needs to be involved. And so like defining those key results and like the hows, I like to say, is so important. And then we also can measure that, and that's why we have KPIs, right? You nailed that.
Thank you.
You just got an A on my
There you go.
Like I usually test people, but then I usually don't tell them. But
Okay, that's good.
yeah, you got an A.
Yeah.
What type of investor do you see yourself as? Like what type of flavor? Like what makes you you?
Kind, thoughtful, and direct.
And cool.
And cool. Try to be cool. Can't help it one way or another. Like I am who I am. But it's I think the more that you can be clear and understanding with people and, treat people with respect.
Right.
It's pretty simple.
When you first start Impulsum, what one thing did you in your head think was important and you found, you know what, that's not the thing, or your viewpoint maybe flipped 180 degrees?
Oh, yeah. I always wanted to start my own firm. I didn't have an idea who that right partner was going to be.
Okay.
And I found that right partner in a old college buddy of mine, Adam Neff, who had been an entrepreneur, an operator, an executive at a handful of different companies, had some really good exits. And we reconnected a couple years before we started Impulsum. And basically just like started talking about tech from our two different perspectives. Me as a venture capitalist, him as an entrepreneur and operator.
Right.
And what I realized is that we had this combination that was really unique. Like it just, we fit together. The puzzle pieces were different and they clicked. What I really looked for when I was starting Impulsum was, how do we do something that's different, that's a value add to companies? But also a big part of it too is like, who do I want to do this with? Like it really is a marriage.
Right.
Like when you create a partnership and he and I have a great relationship, not because we always agree on things, but because we have the ability to talk things through and respect each other. And I can disagree with him and he can disagree with me. I'll never think twice about the fact that he's a good person. And whenever we're trying to like solve a really gnarly problem, having somebody in the foxhole with you that you have an underlying basis of trust is the most valuable thing that I think you could ever have. And I wouldn't trade that for a lot of other things. There's a lot of other attributes about him and my relationship that I could say if you needed to like take a few of them out, that you had to keep something and be like, keep that level of trust above everything else.
Right. Do you find that same thing with the founders that you work with?
I do. That's the interesting thing. When you write somebody a check, we try to do our best to act as almost like an older sibling versus a parent, where we've been through a lot of things in our life, in our business world, and can we pass on some of that information? Right. The only way like you're really going to get someone to be open with you is if you can make them feel like there's no stick by telling you something. So like, for our stage of investing, I don't really think board seats matter. Like people will argue with me that it does, but like we do board meetings, we're observers in pretty much every one of our companies. But if anything's going wrong, they know they can call us without repercussions. And 9 times out of 10, they do. There is always that expectation where they like want to do right by you. Right. You know what I mean? They're, hardworking, earnest people. So it's hard to deliver bad news. We try to create a relationship where they feel like it's okay. And because of the fact that we have this studio, because of the fact that we have all these resources for them, the hope is that they feel comfortable enough and we actually have the ability to help them. What motivates you?
What motivates me?
Yeah.
I'm passionate about innovation. I'm passionate about seeing innovation happen, and I'm super passionate and motivated by helping teams achieve that. I think that's probably the most root thing to me, is that together we can achieve more. It seems so cliche, we all say that, But I really believe that is true. And I think often we forget that in our day-to-day work. We just redid our company logo, Collective Genius. Obviously, Collective Genius, people get it wrong all the time. They say creative genius, or they don't get the idea that together we can do more than we can alone. But we just redid the logo where it's like 3 chevrons. It's the same while you're driving and you see those arrows. And it's like move this way or move this way. We're always under construction, but we always got to keep on moving.
Yeah.
The chevrons are different colors, which is like diversity. Yeah. They're unified, so they're like together, you know, moving in that direction. We're on the road right now. We're always driving, we're always moving forward. But I think that's the one thing with these teams is, even though they're going to come across like failures and challenges, if they unify and every problem's everybody's problem, every victory's everybody's victory, and they just keep moving, they'll eventually solve something really important.
Yeah, that's a good one. Can I ask you like one more? That's okay. I'm curious, if you went a layer deeper, why is all this stuff important to you?
I think it's common evolution. I feel like humanity is always trying to create and move things forward. Yeah. And I think there's some sort of something in our DNA, or there's something deeper in all of us that we want to create and want to build things. Yeah. And I think I remember one of my mentors once said to me, he's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, had sold my first company. He's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to grow something. I want to build something and grow something. He's like, why don't you start a farm? I'm like, oh, that's not exactly what I was saying. Yeah. But it was kind of funny because I was like, there's this drive that at the time I was very less clear about how I actually achieved what I wanted to achieve. Yeah. But there is a root within me is like to create something. And I thought it's not build a lemonade stand. Let's help all these little kids build lemonade stands kind of idea. And I think I love the tip of innovation. And so I don't want to help build a whole bunch of plumbing companies, but I want to help these people that are doing things that have never been done before. Because it's the hardest thing you could possibly do. Most of them fail. And I think most of them can succeed if they work together. Yeah.
It's a way to contribute to humanity. Way to go.
I can't help it. It's honestly, it's like, it does feel like a calling. Yeah. You know what I mean? I almost feel like I didn't choose to do this. Right. Every single day. Yeah. I enjoy it. It's not easy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Especially being in those sessions with people when there's tension, and I will lean into the tension to get everybody communicating so they can come out with something better. Now, one of the best things people can do is have these difficult conversations. They fear away from it, but the biggest challenges are people's biggest opportunities, and they don't even realize that. Yeah. And so if they're either shoving them under the rug or they're freaking out and trying to change everything all the time, right? It's if you bring your team together, you have this semblance of balance.
Isn't it kind of frustrating that, I don't know if it's frustrating is the right word, but I think it's a reality that the hardest things that we do are probably the best things for us.
Right.
And
that's good.
Kind of getting back to like what we were talking about before, and it's like, just wake up and do hard things. Like challenge yourself. That's it.
That's a great t-shirt. Wake up and do hard things.
Wake up and do hard things. There we go.
That could be like the best t-shirt ever.
I mean, like, I feel like let's go to the printing shop right now. We'll do 100. We'll go to the farmer's market. We'll start hanging these out.
No one would buy that shirt. It's kind of like posts. Like, I'll post things, and I know it's not going to get any traction because I hit the root. Yeah. Right? Like, people don't want to say, yeah, transparency, because they're like, let's just go buy that one real quick. Our new t-shirts, I don't think anyone want to buy them because they don't want to do the hard things.
Dude, I have found that the more open and honest I can be with myself and to others, the happier I am in general. Hey. And there's like, things that you like as a person, like maybe like I remember early on in my career, like hiding my skateboard, like not bringing it into the office.
That's what makes you awesome.
I mean, it is, but it's interesting, but it's like this idea of like, when you start being open about yourself, that's when you really start connecting with people. And that a lot of this at the end of the day is trust. Yeah. Like I was talking with another venture capitalist the other day, and we were just sitting there saying like so much of what we do, there's this paperwork, there's these numbers we're sharing back and forth, but it's trust. Right. It's like, are you actually giving me the right information? I believe you are. I believe you're a good person. You're not going to just like fudge the numbers. Right. And that's a lot of people, that's a hard thing to navigate. but like you have to have this level of trust. And part of that is also being like, you can't build trust if you're hiding things.
100%. And being comfortable with yourself, like right away with who you are. I used to have a business where we were selling to large corporations, and I would have to wear a suit.
Yeah.
I would put the suit on in my car. I'd go in, I'd do the meetings. I'd get back in my car, go drive somewhere. I'd take the suit back off and put on my normal clothes again.
Yeah.
And I felt like almost an imposter. And, you know, one day the recession hit in 2018, and I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. You know, like I know these big companies, we had big contracts with companies that wanted really innovative people and processes, and we were doing that for them, but this wasn't me. It wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I want to drive around with you with a baseball cap on.
Yeah.
And, you know, help innovative companies.
A lot of the times I think about this, especially when we're raising for our fund, is like being who you are, whether you're getting on a Zoom call or meeting in person or anything like that. Because like eventually the real you is going to come out. And if it never did, you'd be living a very uncomfortable life, trying to pretend like you're something that you're not.
Right.
So just be who you are, and like either people will say yes or they'll say no. But the people who say no, those probably aren't the people that you should be with anyways. Find those people who you connect with.
100%. Come the time, I'll ask you the most important question.
Yeah.
In this car right now, probably maybe the most important question you've ever been asked in your life.
Yeah.
So here's the scenario. You are trapped on a desert island the rest of your life. You got food and water, so you don't have to worry about that, but you have very little entertainment.
Yeah.
However, you found that 80s boombox, and it has an endless supply of batteries. And you get one wish. What is that one cassette tape that you would like to have? You only get one cassette tape the rest of your life to listen to.
Oh wow! So it's not just a song; it's a whole cassette.
Yep.
Dave Brubeck's Take 5. It's this old jazz album, and it's the first album I ever got. It's a CD. It was a CD my dad bought me, and it just like, to me, it's beautiful. I'm not even like a big jazz person. I probably have gotten his name wrong. I probably got the title wrong. But that, to me, there's a soul and nostalgia to that I think if I was trapped on a desert island, I'd bring it with me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Funny, I haven't listened to that in ages either. I need to revisit that.
All right.
This is great.
Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me.